life, the art of transforming cities into sustainable, vital urban spaces. We have quite a few very renowned guests for this panel today. My name is Jana Aljitz. I'm a climate justice activist from Germany, and I have the honor to facilitate this panel tonight with very interesting international guests. We will talk this evening about how we make the step to create more livable spaces, especially with less cars, but also by offering more alternatives to the car, not for mobility only, but also for people in general to have good spaces. I was very happy to read the names of the panelists when I got the list, because I think we have a very broad spectrum of experiences and backgrounds which we will share today. And I have had the intention to not just have like 3 or 4 single lectures for the audience, but instead actually enter into a debate and exchange our experience that we made, because I think this is how we can learn best from each other. And so let's see how this goes. We have a 4th panelist who will join us maybe and hopefully a little bit later. He experienced a few technical difficulties. Meanwhile, I will present to you the rest of the audience, starting with Elizabeth Deacon. I believe it's yeah, Deacon. Okay, okay. Elizabeth Deacon is a professor of city and regional planning at UC Berkeley, where she is also an affiliate faculty member of the Energy and Resources Group and the Master of Urban Design Group. Deacon's research focuses on transportation and land use policy and the environmental impact of transportation. She has published, and this is really impressive, over 200 articles, book chapters, and reports on the topics, ranging from environmental justice to transportation pricing to development extractions and impact fees. A very warm welcome to Elizabeth. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And then we have Annabelle from the Concello Pontevedra in Spain, Galicia. She is the government spokesperson of the city of Pontevedra. As some of you might know, is I think the very first city in the world who is actually car-free. So it's definitely kind of a role model for a lot of cities to go. She has experience in senior management of both public and private companies, which I think is also a very interesting mixture. And she was, between 2011 and 2015, she was the spokesperson for BNG. Right now, she has quite a few responsibilities at the municipality for the interior regime, I think you say that in English like that, the organization of administration and terms of relationship with citizens, among many others. Annabelle will get some translation, so she might sometimes need a few more minutes to answer, so just that everybody knows. And I see that Philip also is joining. Very warm welcome from our side. We're very happy that you're here. I will go on with John, who was, hi John. Where are you right now? Are you in Seattle or are you in Vancouver? I was not quite sure.
I'm actually in Vancouver, Canada right now visiting, where I think you had a panelist from Vancouver earlier.
Yes, indeed we have. And
okay.
We have to cancel, unfortunately, but now you're here.
Right.
Which doesn't make it a bad experience. I'm really happy to meet you because you seem to be like a public transportation expert. John is the founder and president of Global Telematics, a policy research consultancy, and you're based in Seattle, I believe.
Right.
And you focus on designing policies and actions for transportation improvements. And as a research associate at Minnesota Transportation Institute, you have led team studies on transit-oriented development, urban freight, mobility planning, bus rapid transit, microtransit, and overall public transit productive analysis. So as I said, an expert for public transportation.
Yeah. and been around a while, been to a few places.
Let's see. Thank you for joining the panel. And I'm very happy to see also Philip's face. Philip Bateo, do I pronounce that right? Bateo? My Flemish is quite poor, I have to admit. Oh, now he's gone. No!
Oh.
Maybe he just pushed the button, Event verlassen, which you should never do. If you're still Let's just hope Philip comes back, and I just take the liberty to introduce him anyways.
Right.
Philip is from Ghent. He's the deputy mayor of Mobility, Public Domain and Urban Planning in Ghent, which is a Belgian city nearby Brussels, for those of you who don't know Ghent. It is his second period as a deputy mayor, and in his first period he effectuated in 2017 the Ghent circulation plan, and that plan fundamentally changed the mobility in the whole city. The share of cyclists in all trips increased from 22% to 35%, and the car use fell markedly. Air quality improved, and the number of traffic accidents decreased. So also someone who was able to create some change in the city. So just to get a little warm up and to get an idea, also because we are in this virtual space due to the pandemic, we can't really meet each other. However, this also gives us a chance to talk with very renowned international guests from very different spaces. So I think also it has some advantages. And I would like to start with a warming up question. Just from your own experience, but also from your, let's say, personal preferences, maybe, please let us know, what is, in your view, a livable city? What makes a city a very vital urban space for the people living in it? Elizabeth, would you like to start?
Sure. I'd say it's a city that's walkable and gives you reasons to want to walk to lots of places.
Nice one, thanks. I think that's actually a good moment to switch to Annabelle, because I believe in Pontevedra you can walk quite many ways. What is a livable city for you? What makes a city a vivid space for people?
This is such a
We can't hear the translation yet.
I don't hear anything.
No, we don't hear the translation. Annabelle is being translated. We can't hear her translator going to English yet. Okay, we will move to John and Philip and see if we can sort out the technical issue.
Okay, so this is such a complex question.
Thanks.
For us, in order to answer to it, but I would say that I would like to add something to what Elizabeth Dickin has said, that is, it is a city made that is walkable, but for everyone, no matter your physical, social, or psychic condition. A city where the urban space is a fundamental right for people.
Thank you so much. That's quite a good answer as well. John, what do you say? What is a livable city for you?
I've had the fortunate experience of being able to choose where I live. I've always wanted to live in the United States. I was born here. I was born in the East, and I decided that Seattle, where I live now, is the best place in the country. But to generalize, and by the way, I once had a partner who left me for many reasons, but one thing that she left, a reason other people leave, they didn't like the weather. There are some people who really like a sunshine place. I now have a partner who doesn't like cold, so weather can be very important. But it's also important, of course, to be able to make a living, or if you're retired, to have the services you want. What I'm saying is it's highly individualized. this business of walkability is very important, and Seattle is walkable, where I'm visiting now through the work of Brent and others over the years, is very walkable. It's also easy to move around in both places. Sometimes where you want to go, you can't walk to. So having, I think, a good transit system is a wonderful thing for a city. And I always like places where there's transit. I've been on transit my whole life. I went 18 miles one way in Detroit, Michigan to high school on transit. So transit is important. So transit, walkability, and then of course the ability to make a living or to retire comfortably if that's where you are. All good.
Great, thank you, John. Definitely also a very important perspective. I see that Philip is coming and going. He seems to still have technical issues, so probably we should just take the chance whenever he's here and next. Then we should just use the opportunity to let him talk. So remind me of that. I hope he's coming back soon. Meanwhile, let's start also by going into your experiences. I would love to hear from Annabelle. What was your experience in Pontevedra? So you have a car-free city center for quite a while now, so you're definitely one of the forerunners in that sense. So can you let us know what the experiment, let's call it an experiment because it's something very unknown, has made Pontevedra, what has Pontevedra done right, and maybe also what were pitfalls and what were challenges? We don't hear translation yet.
No me pueden escoitar, no sé por qué.
No todavía. Ahora sí.
Okay, now they can. Okay,
Ahora
okay.
Sí.
Our starting year was 1999. We started from that point, okay. And at that moment, nobody was talking about mobility or urban environment and how necessary was to talk about cities in the place where we stay most of our life. I remember that in 1999, I was leaving my city. I was swearing that I would never come back to my hometown, Pontevedra, that was in the middle of several highways, a lot of cars. So several years later, at that time, everyone was thinking that Pontevedra was a hell. Nobody wanted to live there. After many years working in a community process with all the neighbors, we started thinking about the city in which we wanted to live. I started with a premise that I am a politician and I believe in politics. I think politics can change things. So we didn't want this to be the city in which we wanted to live. So we started a process in which we didn't expose the cars or the buses. We still have cars and buses in the city, but we started to an idea in which we said there are too many cars. All these cars are not required, so we started with 80,000 cars entering the city like 30 years ago. 2 years ago, it's just 7,000 cars that are entering the city. So we started to withdraw the cars from the public spaces and we changed the public spaces in meeting points for the neighbors. So to enjoy them. So when we improve the open air space and we set up the necessary activities, people meet, the city becomes more lively, a place in which people can create, think. That was the end, the goal.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. Very good to hear from your experience. Philip, welcome back. Can you hear us? And you could talk, that would be great. Philip, not really reacting. I would love to hear from the experience in Ghent, because they also have reduced.
Yeah, Ghent is a wonderful place. I'd like to hear as well. I've been there. It's a wonderful place.
It is indeed. I've lived in Brussels, and Ghent was very, very close. And I've seen some changes also in the last years, and it's very interesting how they pushed back cars as well and increased the number of bicycles, since Belgium is not like the first bicycle nation, let's say.
Let's grab Philip while he's here.
Yeah, but he doesn't seem to hear us.
Oh, right here.
He doesn't seem to hear us, and he doesn't.
Will you work on that?
Okay.
Damn.
Please work on that.
Okay. So
I'm happy to comment a little bit about my experience.
Yes, please go into it.
Most of my life, either in the Boston metropolitan area or in the San Francisco metropolitan area, both of which are rather large metropolitan regions. And in Boston, I lived basically in Cambridge most of the time, which is a small university town, and very dense. More dense, by the way, than either Ghent or than Pontevedra. I looked those up, and Cambridge is a couple times denser than your city. Mm-hmm. And so one would think they would be able to do more than they do right now with auto restrictions. But and Berkeley is also denser than Pontevedra or than Ghent, surprisingly to me. So two cities of Cambridge is about 100,000, 105,000, and Berkeley is now about 120,000, both university towns, but with a lot of people who are not university affiliated. And I think one of the characteristics both of those towns have had is that while both have been heavily influenced by the automobile, and much of their development grew up, especially in Berkeley, grew up after the automobile was a presence in life. We don't have the historic centers dating back to the 13th century that you have in Ghent or Pontevedra. What we have seen is a desire not to be totally dependent on the automobile. And in both cities, what that's meant is giving transit priority, supporting transit, supporting bikeways, and especially protected bikeways, and expanding the use of those as a way of moving people distances that are a bit too far to walk, creating good walking environments, trying to create many housing opportunities with community shopping and other activities that are nearby that are attractive and interesting and fun places to go. And the result in both cities is that less than half of the trips are made by automobile. So I think that's actually something to think about. Even auto-oriented cities that grew up in the age of the automobile, that did not have the historic centers dating back to the Romans or the Gauls or the Celts, and did not have the high-density ancient centers, don't have the historic preservation drives at the same level that European cities have, can still find ways to create many alternatives for people to get around, and transit's important to that. Bicycles are important to that, and good walkable environments are important to that. I think John's right. You need all of those modes to make this work. I'd say one other thing about that, and that's that when you have an auto-oriented city, you have to figure out how to deal with the automobile. And it often is not simply a matter of saying, we need to remove the automobile. I think it's easier in some ways if you're in an ancient city with narrow streets and tight spaces to say it's impossible to have these cars here. They're causing havoc, than it is in an American city where the streets are wide and you're removing them not because they're causing havoc, but because they're deteriorating the quality of life for the local residents. And that's true, by the way, in some German cities, I think, as well, where the streets are not necessary, and some of the suburbs in all European countries that were developed with the automobile. So once we get out of the city centers, we still have an issue in dealing with excess automobile use, and European problems then begin to look a little bit more like American problems in doing that.
Going to John, maybe connecting to what Elizabeth just said. Thank you, Elizabeth. For what do you think makes public transport not only an attractive option, but actually a better option to the automobile, to the car?
Well, we in Seattle have a downtown area where car control, if you like, and higher use of transit is very much the focus. I mean, I would like to suggest that focus on a particular and somewhat limited geographical area, like a center city. Car control is very possible. I mean, it takes a process, a democratic process. It takes political leadership, but you can do it. For example, I live a little further out of town in Seattle. I have a car, an electric car, but I don't drive it downtown anymore, even though it's actually is the fastest way to get there. Well, why don't I? Well, the price of parking has been raised very, very high. And I just don't like paying for parking, and there is a bus, and I go to the bus. In fact, sometimes I drive to the bus because I know places to park where it's near a bus stop, but it's out of the area. It's in the car-oriented area. So sometimes multimodal is what you have to think about in the United States, at least, and Canada, which I'm familiar with, meaning you have people who live in car-oriented areas because that's the way it grew up. That's how people move around, and there are issues there. We can talk about that. But when it comes to Center City, Vancouver, or Center City, Seattle, or Center City, San Francisco, and I presume Center City, Berlin, you know, it's not very comfortable to drive there, actually, unless, you know, you're used to it. So this managing in a limited area with high parking prices, good transit, carriages, whatever. I think autonomous little electric autonomous shuttles are coming to some cities. It's all good, and you can control cars. And in Seattle, by the way, a lot of streets have been made, and in Vancouver too, some bike only, and cars have been limited on streets to give people in the pandemic a chance to get more fresh air. So focus, narrow geographic focus, all things are possible. There are car-free zones around the world. It can be done.
Thank you,
the
John.
bigger challenge, John, is not those places where it's relatively easy. The bigger challenge is at the fringes if we're really concerned about climate change. Because
well, that's right.
You don't have the same land costs that drive the parking prices up. You don't have the same narrow streets or historic reasons for not letting the cars be there. They were developed for cars, but still we realize that the cars are creating an environmental hazard and sometimes a social equity hazard problem as well.
Of course.
And that's the bigger challenge.
Yeah, but of course, a car in the suburbs in the U.S., a car is a beautiful thing in the suburbs, right? It lets you go out, lets you go to other cities quickly.
Not so beautiful if you're among the 20% or so of low-income households who don't have that car.
That's right. Equity is an issue.
That brings me also to another question that I wanted to pose all of you, actually, because you were mentioning principally a regulation over prices. Like, as you said, John, you let the car because it's actually too expensive to park it. In Pontevedra, they made the same experience. They just made the public space more expensive as one of many measurements, as I understand. However, pricing usually hits the low-income households more than the ones who can actually afford it. They don't really care because, I mean, then transport is a little bit more expensive. They would still not use the public transport offered. So I would like to ask you as well, what could make a public transport as it is even better? And I'm not only talking about more trains on the way, and more density. Like, what could make it an actual attractive place to be or place to take. I don't know. um,
Anybody?
So, in my experience in lots of places, there's a need for more pride of of offerings in the transit that's being offered. They're not always designed to be as clean, as comfortable, as fast, as efficient as as they could be. And so when talk to some transit agencies, I get the attitude that, well, they're struggling for money and they're providing the best they can, and they know it's not that great, but that's kind of the way it goes. That's an attitude that's really problematic. It's an attitude that goes beyond the transit agencies to the entire public when we hear that attitude. And I think that has to change because what we want to have is travel times by public transit that are competitive or faster than taking a private vehicle. And to do that, you have to have vehicles that are on time and that can pick up and offer seats, if possible, to the people riding them, and that are not going to make people feel that they're suffering while they're on board. You need to be able to feel dignified while you're riding public transit. And to me, that means that we have to think about offering transit priority lanes and retiming traffic signals to give buses priority even when cars are allowed in areas, and combining transit with new mobility so that you have the shuttles and whether they're automated or not automated, and all the other, and bike sharing, and for people who need that to go a little farther than they're capable of walking, and pedicabs. It doesn't have to be high tech. It can be a human powered transportation, or it can be electric assisted transportation. But I would say green transportation should be what we're aiming for. That is a multimodal public system that works in an integrated fashion and that creates a level of service that takes travel time into account in particular, but also comfort and convenience into account on a door-to-door basis. So if we start thinking door-to-door, how are we going to get people there as fast or faster than they could get by car? And everything that will do that, that's green, should be considered a public form of transportation, and we want to support that, and not subsidize the automobile through discounted parking spaces or government funded highways of which the public only pays a small portion, or the costs are hidden in some other kind of taxes. Then we can begin to change behavior. I think those signals are important. Pricing the highways properly would be another thing to do. Congestion pricing and road pricing that takes into account the full cost, including the social and environmental cost of the use of autos and highways, would be a solution that I would certainly endorse. Having taught at Lake Constance a few years back, I heard from a number of German students who told me that was outrageous to even talk about in Germany. But I still think it's time to keep talking about it because people become more comfortable with ideas the more they hear them. So we need to explain why those ideas are important and advocate for them if we're going to see change happen.
Absolutely right. We still do not have a proper internalization of the real costs of traffic, I think, nowhere. So thanks for that. John and Annabelle, do you want to add something?
I'll yield to Annabelle for a moment if she likes.
I think she does.
Good.
Thanks.
I think you can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. As Elizabeth said, our reality is a little bit different from the American reality. We were a small town with a different history, but not because of that we stopped being a city. And as a car storage, because in a one square kilometer we had nearly 80,000 cars in transit. So that is absolutely unsustainable for us. About the public transport, we agree with all the arguments by Elizabeth, but I would like to add another one, and it is the economic rationalization of the public transport. That it needs a better planning, a better route planning. In Pontevedra, we combine the intermodality, pedestrian and cyclist intermodality, and a public transport network around the city with another project that we are implementing right now, that is the demanding the transport upon request. Is a transport based on the public transport of Pontevedra with the taxis, and with this collaborative transport through competing applications, they would take care of the farthest of the transport at the farthest point of the town center, because many times it is not possible to have buses circulating around, because the schedules are not suitable for all the requirements and needs of the neighbors.
Right.
Thanks,
Right.
Annabelle. John.
Yeah, right sizing the vehicle is very, very important. There are a lot of streets around the world and even in the suburbs of America where bigger vehicles don't work. There's actually a developing trend now in the US and I think in Canada as well, for what they call not micro mobility. Micro mobility means scooters and electric bicycles and so on, but micro transit means can we use smaller vehicles that can maneuver in suburban neighborhoods and pick up people kind of on demand. It turns out the technology for doing that is getting better and better. It's sort of like imitating those TNC Uber type things. The public transit can do it with vans. There are companies that specialize on that. Canadian companies, in fact, are strong in that, as well as U.S. companies. So that's something that's being tried to increase the usability of transit in lower density areas. It's a trend I would encourage, and you need good software to make it work. To make it responsive, because of the resource problem. I mean, one of the enemies of doing everything you want in transit is public money, and because there are just a lot of things to spend public money on, and there are just limits to how much you can tax. I think that would be true in any country, any state. So there's always, and it gets to be a political question, how much money do you want to put into public mobility, especially in a country like mine where you have car dealers. I don't know if you know it, but it's actually not very expensive to have a car in one sense. You walk into a car dealership in America, especially a used car, and you just tell the man how much you want to pay per month, and you will have a car. It's kind of astonishing. I went for just a story. I went for 2 years without a car about 10 years ago. I thought I'd try it out around Seattle. And I find everything, it slows down your life, and it slowed down my life. Things take longer. It's well known as a rule of thumb. Betty can confirm this. It takes, in general, as a general rule, it can take twice as long to go someplace on transit. It's just a fact of life. Depends on where you go. If you live near a BART stop and work near a BART stop, that's the subway in San Francisco, it's faster than a car, no question about it. And I can get downtown Seattle as fast as in a car, but for going suburb to suburb or going outward, so cars are a formidable enemy, is what I'm saying. So two things to think about. You can have a war on cars, but you've got an enemy there, a strong enemy, and it's a very useful device. And then the other thing is just resources, and you always have to be thinking about how much money is available to spend in the political process to make a system work where it's difficult to make it work.
I agree with that. And to give some examples, I can think of two cases that I think are important. One was done in a suburb of the San Francisco Bay Area, to the east of Oakland, so out in the hills. And what they did is they contracted with Uber and Lyft, with the transportation network companies, and taxis also could join this program, to replace some transit routes that were costing them an average of $35 a ride, because the area was low density and the trips were relatively circuitous, and there was very low demand on the buses. They rarely had more than 5 people on a bus. So when you only have 2 or 3 people on a bus, the costs are immense for that service. And yet the services were critical for senior citizens, for elderly people who either couldn't drive or didn't feel comfortable driving in the locations at the times of day they needed to go to, say, the doctors or to the pharmacy or to the grocery store to get things. And for people who didn't have a car, because not everybody can go into that dealership and get a loan because
Right.
uh, or and other people who just can't or don't want to drive a car. So there were definitely some people who were transit dependent and did not have the choice that John just suggested, that they could go buy a used car and
Right.
make it work. Anyway, they went into this. They tried this contract service, and they reduced the cost to about $8 a ride, with much better service, much better door-to-door service by doing this in shared taxis and shared Ubers and Lyfts vehicles. So what they were basically doing is turning private cars or taxis into transit vehicles at a much lower cost. Now, there's some issues with that, and one issue is that in the United States, there's been a big controversy over pay scales for the Uber and Lyft drivers, and I personally think they're not being paid enough, and it's not an equitable system. So that number is probably lower than it ought to be. But nevertheless, it doesn't make sense to be running buses around that aren't efficiently used. And you need to have something like 10 people on an American bus for it to pencil out compared to an American automobile, which have gotten much more fuel efficient from an environmental perspective. So it's not just cost, it's also social and environmental cost that becomes part of the issue. The second example is using automated vehicles. And we are beginning to do some experiments with automated transit, and we found that automated transit can save a lot of money, and people will use it under certain circumstances. Now, that also raises some labor issues because you're putting the drivers out of work. But so you have to think about that as well if you're concerned about social policy. But in terms of transit operations, thinking multimodally and thinking about new technologies and how to make best use of your workforce might mean that you'd be better off using your workforce to make sure the buses are on the heavily used routes are able to stay on time and are operating well and are kept clean and well maintained, rather than use your labor to drive empty buses around in suburban locations. So, we can make those kinds of choices, but I think we need to be smarter about matching technology to markets and really trying to compete on the time issue, not just on offering kind of a minimum level of service that will get you there eventually if you have to use it in public transit. I would like to see public transit be a better service than the automobile in many more places, and I think it can be, not just in places like San Francisco and Vancouver and downtown Seattle, but in many more places if we get smarter about how we think about transit.
As you say, Elizabeth, and you, John, and Annabelle as well, like very many questions seem to boil down to the question of what is offered as public infrastructure for mobility, for traffic, how good it is, how affordable is it. And I would like to draw our attention a little bit to what has happened, especially in the last year during the Corona pandemic, because for me it seemed to not only crush lots of what we believed in and change the way we have conferences and the way we meet, but also to change the way we move. So here in Germany, I think the observation is true for many other countries. lots of more people relied more on their own car due to safety reasons and due to fear of the pandemic, obviously. So we have more private cars registered now, used cars, new cars, whatever. But on the other hand, we also have seen that cities made great advances in constructing more bike lanes, in making the public transport more efficient and having more buses or trams offered. So we have lots of changes in a very quick time, which we have waited for maybe a long time, which we have lobbied for a long time, and suddenly it was possible. But on the other hand, also we have backlashes. To put my question in a nutshell, what do you think we can learn also from the corona pandemic when it comes to changing our city?
Certainly, we've learned that electric bicycles are very, very popular, and they're selling like hotcakes. Bicycles are selling well all over the world, and it's of course great to make biking safe, especially mixed in with all those people who are scared to be on buses and are climbing into cars. So you need to paint in bike lanes, and there's just a lot of work to be done to make biking safer. Holland, the Netherlands is always my model for that. The facilitation of biking there, and I understand in Norway, which I don't know, or in Denmark. All very important part of livability, and I presume that's happening in Ponteverde, Spain, right? Facilitation of biking, is that happening? I think that's a great thing. And I don't know how it works in Europe, but in Seattle we like multimodal, so you can take your bicycle aboard the light rail. That's true in Vancouver as well. There are foot ferries. You can take your bicycle aboard, and all our buses in Seattle and Vancouver have bike racks, so you can mount a bike on the front. So for multimodal trips, all very important to provide those combinations, multimodal combinations.
So another thing that's happened all across the United States is that in shopping and restaurant districts where parking was allowed on street, cities have allowed the restaurants to take over those parking spaces to create outdoor eating establishments. Mm-hmm. And in lots of parts of the United States, that works year round. In some parts of the United States, it only works if they also put an awning and some heaters out there. But those have been super popular. And there have been some surveys done about whether people would like the parking to come back or the restaurants to continue to have the outdoor seating. And the outdoor seating is winning in almost all of these surveys. So I think that's actually a really good sign that people are willing to not drive as much or maybe park farther away and walk to protect more active uses in their shopping districts. And we're seeing everything, even seeing nail salons moving outdoors in some parts of the country, and creating little shops outside in what used to be parking spaces. Now, Berkeley's been doing that for a long time. Berkeley started doing that back in the 1980s by turning parking spaces into parklets, where there could be maybe a swing set, if there's enough room, and taking some intersection space and some parking spaces and creating green space, creating cafe space, creating places for public art. So that's been a long tradition, and it's been paid for, because finance is always an issue, by some combination of the merchants wanting it, putting up the money for it, or residents saying they want it, in which case the city might pay for it. Depending on the income of the neighborhood, it might be entirely publicly funded. If it's a low-income neighborhood, and it might be paid for through an assessment if it's a richer neighborhood. But there are ways of doing that by saying to people, how do you want to use the space? And surprisingly enough, people don't always want to use it for cars. They often want to use it for many other better activities, in my view, better activities. Activities that are more fun and serve more of the people. That doesn't mean they don't get complaints from the car drivers. They do get complaints from car drivers saying, I want to park right in front of the place I'm going, and you took away my parking space. But as long as there are two other people saying, but I really would rather sit in the cafe that's now been created, then they lose.
We will talk about these people in a bit, but I see Annabelle wants to add some things as well.
Yes, when we started with this transformation, we said that what we were going to do is to remove some privileges to cars and offering these privileges to people in general. All along with pandemic, we feel that we were already prepared because our urban spaces were very wide spaces where you can walk. In Pontevedra, we are in the northwest of Spain, so there is lots of rain, and our weather could be maybe similar to Seattle, but we get lots of rain. So we said that the space or the measure of the ideal space is that two people could cross each other using an open umbrella. If the space is wide enough for those people to cross each other, it is enough. And we were transforming the city little by little. And after the pandemic hit us and we were removed from the lockdown, we were able to walk the streets. We feel that the spaces of Pontevedra were safe. We didn't need to cut any streets to traffic, or we needed to make more cyclable lanes. We thought about making a city available for people even with disabilities, and this brought us lots of benefits because we were able to practice sport and to do many other activities around.
Sorry. Great. You want to add something, John?
Yeah, I also want to talk about car control, and Paul Minette and I just did a workshop on the notion of making sure that passenger transport, even in private vehicles, is an important part of the big picture in car control. I mean, one way to have fewer cars in an urban center or an employment center is to double up. I mean, go in with a neighbor. So in where I live and in places I know about in California, there's priority is given to the parking for people who come as a carpool, right? If there are two people in the car or three people in the car, you get a better parking space. Or we of course have high occupancy vehicle lanes where those are for buses, but you can also add in we call it HOV2, which means two people have to be in the car, or even HOV3, meaning three people have to be in the car to make sure that it's a free flowing lane. And there are various policies to focus on that, and I would advocate that transit agencies think about themselves as mobility agencies and think about all the ways that people move. And I mean, buses, trains, important, but so because of the starting point of so many people are car oriented, especially where they live, talking about getting people to double up and increasing the passenger load in cars, I think could be a very important step.
Nice one, John. And John, I really like the idea. Although I would be curious how that is controlled, by which authority, how they control how many people are in the car.
Well, we're not yet at the point where we make people do that, although it happens. I mean, we have freeway interchanges where you have to have two people in the car to use it.
Wow.
And we have in Washington State a commute trip reduction law, and we don't make employers force their people to carpool, but they have to report how many people do, and it comes into regulations for new building. You can't build a new building that has a lot of people working there and just say, well, we'll just build a big parking lot and everybody can drive there. No, there may be a limit on the parking, and you have to have a plan for making more sustainable more people, fewer cars. I mean, I'm just saying this is policy. This is government policy, and it's politics, right? I mean,
Absolutely, it is.
not everybody likes this. It's you got to work on it.
Also to the direction where I also would like to go with you, because obviously we not only need policies that change spaces, we also need policies that change people's behaviors and maybe also preferences. And so I would like to ask you, what do you think? How do we reach the people that we need to convince? I'm talking about the car drivers. I'm talking about the people you were mentioning, Elizabeth, who do not accept to give up public space for restaurants or meeting space, but who want to park their cars right in the city center for no money or very little money. So we have also this classical situation of business owners who are afraid that people are not able to reach their shops when people are not able to reach their shops with a car. So how do we?
So I made a practice of studying who's actually using the parking spaces in front of shops in small shopping areas in Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco, Palo Alto, Los Angeles, Pasadena, a bunch of California, Sacramento,
quite a bit,
a bunch of California cities, and also a few in the East Coast, and a few in Florida. And every time that we studied this, what we found is a huge percentage of the cars were actually being parked by employees of the businesses that were complaining that their customers couldn't get to the businesses. Because we looked at the license plate numbers and watch who was there and how long they were there, and we could show them that. And once we did that, and we discovered, and then we also did surveys of the customers and said, how did you get here? And we found that in many shopping areas, a lot of the customers actually got there by walking from their workplace during the middle of the day or after work. By walking the entire way, by taking a bike, by taking transit and walking to their workplace. So they weren't driving and trying to park in front. So it's a question of who's making the most noise rather than what the data show. Data can be very important in convincing people of what's actually happening. And we found that when we showed them this and said, your own employees are part of your problem, why don't you give them transit passes and free up the parking spaces if that's really what your concern is? We had a whole different discussion. The other piece of it is back to pricing it properly. Why are they there to do it? Well, John told you already. He said he doesn't drive to downtown Seattle because they're going to charge him $30 a day if he does it or more. And he doesn't want to spend $30 or $40 just to spend a day in downtown Seattle. So if you actually charge, and that's because that's what it costs to provide that parking space and to make use of the land, which can be used for many more profitable uses in office space or retail or housing than in parking. So that's a fair price for that parking space. They're not gouging him by charging him that. They're charging him actually what they should be charging for that parking space. If we all did that and charged people the actual land rent value and improve land value, because you have to pave it, maintain it, etc., then we wouldn't have so many people driving, and that's part of it too. And I already said road pricing is part of it. California has used the kinds of trip reduction ordinances and employer-based requirements for many years. I think they're important and they're effective. I think you have to couple that with public side incentives and requirements that actually are more economically sensible than many of the policies that we use. So, don't keep subsidizing the car, and you won't have as many people using the car.
I see a way to go, and I totally agree with you. But how do we build bridges to these people who have the car in the head, in their mind, in their hearts, and who are not willing to let go?
There are some very important, Betty raises the point about data and facts, which can be inconvenient. And I've already raised that if you're going to have a war on cars, you've got a formidable enemy. That's been reinforced to me by some new work I've seen coming out of MIT. I'm going to give you some terms to search. car pride. That's English, car pride. Put that in quotes. And there's a researcher named Moody, blocking on her first name. Joanna Moody. Okay, Elizabeth already knows about this, who has found some interesting psychological things about people in their cars. Goes way beyond the utility. It's a point of comfort. It's difficult, and I'm just saying you got to know your enemy. If you're going to have a war on cars, watch out. The car at the moment, in my opinion, the cars are winning, and we can talk about why they do. And that's not to say on a local basis you can do a lot of control. And just another quick point I'd make on car control and getting into people's heads. You really ought to tell people before they get to a place, and I'm talking a lot about visitors and tourists, what the parking situation is. Something I've noticed in Europe, there is a bit of signage, electronic signage along the roads, and I've seen it in Switzerland, I've seen it in France, I know it's in Germany, where you have some indication of how much parking is left. There's a thing in parking, you only need one. Okay, a lot of people in cars, I only need one parking space. I'm good at finding parking. Well, come on, put a sign up and say, don't go past here. There is no parking. It's zero. We measure it electronically. So good information for those people who love their cars before they drive into a place. Let them know, no, you're not going to find that one, and do something else.
Well, but I don't think no matter what we do, we're going to get people to quit using cars if the car costs them out of pocket not a whole lot more than transit would cost them. And we only run it until 9 o'clock at night. And so if they want to go out after that, they can't use it anyway. Or it takes 40 minutes to make a trip on the bus or on the train because it's slow or it requires a couple of transfers and waits. And it takes 20 minutes or 10 minutes even to do it if you just jump in your car. And we subsidize the parking on top of it. You get all those things put together, no rational person. You can talk about people some people love their cars. Some people grow out of that after they're teenage boys and up to 25 maybe love their cars. I'm not so sure that I buy that as something that mature adults get too deeply into. Some do. But the bottom line is, it's even if people don't have a car pride, they want to be seen in their Beamers because it's a status symbol for them or a sense of their adulthood, then just rationality would say don't do it if it's going to take you 3 times as long and be a miserable experience. So you have to have a competitive product. You wouldn't expect if you're trying to sell wilted vegetables versus beautiful ones, what are people going to buy? They're going to buy the beautiful ones, not the wilted ones. If you sell them wilted transportation versus comfortable transportation, what do you expect? People are going to take the comfortable one if they can afford it.
I always like to buy the old potatoes in the supermarket because I know no one will buy them. I don't want them to go to trash.
Well, potatoes, maybe, but do you buy wilted lettuce?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
No.
Annabelle, I would like to hear from you. What was your experience since you kind of went through that process already? How did you deal with the people who did not want to let go of their cars, who had in mind that this is actually the best option for them, who love their cars in a almost emotional way, as John mentioned as well? The car pride, I really like the word. Let us know, please.
The key for us is not to talk to these people. Maybe it's a strong point, but when we arrived at the government, we didn't expect that everyone was going to shout, "Oh yes, good, they're going to withdraw the cars." No, we showed them what we wanted to do. We did it. During the first month, we stopped the circulation in the town center. Since 1999, we still have the same measure. So some people have car pride. they are proud of using their car. But what we did is not allowing these cars that were driving across the city to see the environment, to show off their car, or to go to shops to which they could go just by walking. We didn't authorize them to do that anymore. So we have these parking spots around the city so that they could park their cars, and telling them in this city you can park and you can walk. This is Pontevedra. You park and you walk. We stopped having parking spots in the town center, and we created service parking areas. So you could park there for 15 minutes to unload your products at your shop, and then you have to leave. You have to drive away. And we also show for to these shoppers that the best showcase for them, the best exhibition, marketing campaign for them was to allow walking by these shops free of cars, create events at the open air around these shops. So we are happy that since 1999, with the same mayor, with the same political party, and with the new councillors, we are set. You are arriving here. You are going to govern for 4 years. If citizens are not happy with your management, they will stop voting you, and you will have to leave. But if they're happy with your policies, you will renew your government, and that's what have been done since 1999. We promised them to have a free car city, and we know that there are people that will never vote us again. But for now, we have more voters than those people who are not happy
Right.
because they cannot drive their cars.
Yeah. Politics matters. That's a wonderful exposition. I mean, people sort out. So in Seattle, there are more bike lanes. Speed limits are being reduced. I've no doubt that some people are saying, I don't want to live in Seattle anymore. Okay, well, there's going to be some sorting. It's just the way it goes. But the votes are there, right? So, and there are votes in Seattle for way more transportation, transit spending. I mean, heavy infrastructure, more votes than I like to see. But we're outvoted. I mean, I'm just saying there are different people feel different ways about how to spend money and what to do. And it is politics, and it takes leadership. And political leadership, sometimes taking a position that it's hard to believe you can get elected on that position, but it happens. And there you go. It's politics, democracy. Yeah.
John's an expert on telecommuting. That's something he's really led on in the literature. And one of the things that I think we're seeing in the pandemic is we're all telecommuting. And John, I wonder what your thoughts are. Are we going to continue to get our groceries delivered by Instacart and to work at home more? What's your prognostication?
Well, I think we have behavior right now that's governed by the fact that it's a little bit dangerous to mix, right? We know about, but we're getting vaccinated. I think that there will be a snap back to some of the previous ways. I think there will be residual change, right? It's because it's a big shock, and some of us really like some of the things we're seeing, but I believe that. I believe there are enormous advantages in shopping where you can touch the merchandise. I think there are enormous advantages. I would love to be in Bremen interacting.
I would pick my ugly potatoes myself.
Yeah, exactly. No, there will be more return. This business of we don't need to go to the office anymore. We're all going to telecommute. Very familiar talk. We've heard it in the oil crisis before. There are these little waves of new people discover telecommuting, but it can get old when your kids get older, or you decide you want a dog. There's a time dynamic here. In our country, as Betty knows, a woman named Patricia Mokhtarian, who used to be at UC Davis and now is a emeritus down there, or a leader named professor down at Georgia Tech, is very, very clear that, we're going to have some changes, but there are enormous advantages in face-to-face and meeting and going to the store. Among other things, it shows I care. It shows I care. I care enough to go to Bremen and go to a conference. And this is likely one I would have gone to. I'm just saying. And that's how you sort people out. The people who show up are the people who care. And there are many things like sports. I mean, yeah, I'd much rather watch a football game on television. But no, that's not the way a lot of people feel they want to be there. I'm just saying. So there's a sorting out.
I want to go to the Red Sox. I'm sorry.
Exactly. Well, that's right. I said football, not baseball.
Okay.
But you know, we're social animals. It's going to come back. Believe me. Once we get our vaccines and start feeling more comfortable.
Yeah,
I think there'll be a surge.
I like this positive energy of vision where we can be together.
Get well, stay well. Don't get sick if you can. I mean, we've gone through a terrible year.
Sorry, John. I have a closing question for all of you, but before that, I would like to see if we can bring in the people watching the panel. My interface doesn't really allow to see chat or see people watching it, but I'm quite sure there's a technical organization person who in the background who observes maybe a chat and maybe can bring us some comments or questions from the audience. I see a chat, but I think that's also only private one. Let's wait for a minute to see if someone can bring in some questions or comments. I'm not sure if that works. No. I don't really see something. Okay, so I will give it another try in a bit. Otherwise, that's fine too. We've been talking about a lot of measurements, a lot of great ideas, to be honest. How to improve the infrastructure, the alternative options, how to take political action, and how to push back cars as well. In order to reclaim the public space. I would like to hear from all of you, also from your different perspectives and backgrounds. What do you think should be the next steps? What is strategically wise to do for political decision makers who should not be afraid to lose votes? And also for activists, like people on the ground who want to improve their city life, who want to have more meeting spaces, especially in times of the pandemic. So what is your advice, let's say, for next steps or good strategic answers?
Well, civic engagement is very important. Civic engagement and understanding the point of view of other people. As I've gone along in my life, listening to the other side, people who love the way they do things and have awareness. You got to try things. Special events matter. I had the privilege of being in Vancouver for the 2010 Winter Olympics. It's a few years ago now, and basically everybody could sort of understand that this is going to be a crazy time. You really shouldn't drive your car into Center City, Vancouver. Downtown Vancouver turned into a festival zone. The streets were closed. A lot of people in the suburbs said, oh, okay, I'll take that TransLink bus downtown. And it's like, well, that worked well. And so it got people thinking that they never rode the bus. But it was a special event, right? We understand we can't have everybody driving into, you can overwhelm, a festival site with too many cars. So I suggest events. I think car-free days are a wonderful idea. Car-free days, and they happen around the world, and there are people promote this. I even think there's an association of car-free days. Think about it. We have car-free streets in Seattle on Sunday. So you got to try stuff in a special way, and when you get people to experience things, they change. events.
I liked I like Concelo's comment that political bravery is a worthwhile endeavor. I think that's right. I think having the courage to do the right thing and recognize that 100% consensus is not going to happen in most societies with a democratic ability for people to express their opinions is, is not a reality. We won't ever have that kind of 100% of people agreeing on much of anything. But we can make policies based on good evidence, on good economics, on good social justice principles, thinking about making sure we're taking care of those of us who are not as advantaged as others. And if we can express clearly, articulate clearly why we're doing it and what the benefits will be, and then try it out, I think John's making the point that people learn from experience. So learning by doing and leading by example are things I think are super important in this. But ultimately, we have to find ways of making a green transportation option, which I think transit can be a very important portion, a competitive way of traveling. And that means matching transportation strategies to markets, using the technologies that will work in markets. It means thinking about how to do land development as in growing areas in ways that are serviceable by green transportation. It means investing in the things that will move us in that direction, in an equitable and economic and green direction, removing hidden subsidies, and step by step, keep going.
Let's hear from Spain.
I think the response is making lively cities in which you cannot hear cars, cities in which you hear conversations, and cities in which you recover the open air where you can breathe, such as in our case, in which since 2011 we don't have any person uh, dead by car hits. So looking for new challenges to create better societies.
Absolutely.
I'm going to have to leave, so thanks everybody. It's nice talking to you.
Pleasure seeing you, Betty.
Nice to see you. Nice to meet you both. Bye.
Sorry. My baby sometimes screaming in the background, so I always mute my micro. That was a bit. That was quick for Elizabeth to leave. I hear that there are actually no questions from the audience, so I would like to just close the round for now. Also have to say that I'm really sorry that we couldn't hear Philip due to technical issues that sometimes happens. I just phrased today the sentence that the technology is usually the biggest pitfall, so we should not rely on technology if we want to solve the climate crisis. We need more creative solutions than just technology. I was really, really happy to hear lots of your ideas today. Lots of inspiring ideas, and in a way I was thinking like, wow, these people make it sound so easy.
No, it's not easy.
Sometimes we have this car-centric cities, cities especially, but landscapes and all over, like we've got millions of highways here in Germany. So sometimes it's really, really difficult to see how we can change these super strong infrastructures and the car-centric culture in the hearts and minds of the people. But in a way, I think all of you with the different experiences and backgrounds gave us today good ideas on how to change step by step, on by giving alternatives to the people, by improving the life just in the space itself, and showing how beautiful it could be if we move differently in more collective ways and in more green ways, for sure. So I was really happy to see that.
Closing
Yes,
comment, if I
please,
may.
give us a closing comment.
I think we should. I think there's a lot to say based on travels around the world and thinking about it, that people like walkable urbanism. People like cafes and walkable places and quiet and breathing clean air. I know I do, and my partner does as well. So we have these places. The issue is, how do you get there? Okay, because they're not everywhere, but it's downtown Vancouver in a neighborhood where I live in the suburbs, and we can have and this wonderful city in Spain I need to visit, Ponte Verde. But how do you get there? So I think what we're talking about is nodes of urban livability, and then the question is, how do you go between those? And that can be more difficult because new train tracks are expensive, and cars are a great way to go between places. I happen to know that. We all know that. And so we have to think about making sure that cars become cleaner. And then we have to make sure that people can park, if you want, on the edges of these livable places, and then get inside with transit or walking or whatever, what you'd call park and ride. I just did a big study. Park and ride is very effective for getting people on transit, but that parking has to be priced. It has to be managed. You don't want people to drive 50 miles and then find, well, there is no parking, and then that just makes them angry. That's about information. So nodes of livable urbanism, walkable urbanism, great places, and then how to get between them, different problems. And I urge that bifurcation, that split in thinking about the problem. And thank you very much for a great session. I'd like to hear from Spain, please.
We will. Thank you, John.
Well, firstly, we would like you all come to Pontevedra.
Yeah.
At any time when we talk about Pontevedra, we say, if you don't believe it, you can come visit and check it.
Right.
So
We will.
it's you will be very, very welcome. We believe in what we totally agree. I totally agree with what John said. People are not idiots. So people who want to live in good places, the people want to breathe. People want to go walking. So if we do that, people are going to appreciate that. Neighbors are going to be happy. Retailers are going to be happy. Are going to see it to grow their business. So, from our own experience, our recipe is to test without fear. Uh, talking with people, with associations, with the neighbors, talking with people, what type of city we want, in which type of city we want to live. After talking with people, we can create lively cities. But our secret is firstly to not to have fear, not to be afraid, and be brave enough to change things.
Thank
Leadership.
you, Annabelle. That was just the perfect closing quote. Be brave for the change to come. That's really nice. I hope that inspired the people listening as well. I want to give a big thanks to the panelists, of course, joining this virtual session. I hope the next time we will meet, that will be in person. That will be very great. I'd love to see you. And also, I want to give a big thank to the organizational team of the ÖffiCON. I think they made a great job in their background to organize this, sending all these emails, giving all the information, working with the platform. I felt very well attended to in that way. So I want to give a big thanks to that too, and for organizing this space, even in these times of the pandemic. So I wish you all a great night, and thank you very much, and hope to see you very soon. And I want to invite you as well to join the sessions tomorrow. There will be lots of more spaces where we can talk about more questions on how to change our cities, how to improve our public transports. Me, myself, I'm going to talk about the feminist side of the traffic revolution. So be welcome to join.
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon. Have a great night.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Or morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.